then I finally looked up. I looked up to see what it was, and it was 92 ohm coax,
Huh.
which doesn't match anything. But one of the good things about it is, unlike all other coaxes in the world, it was free. And so I used it.
I think
And
there might be a few other free coaxes hanging around in the world.
oh yeah,
I bet you could get some 75 ohm cable TV coax pretty cheap.
you can use RG6. Yes, you can.
Can I break
You
in?
can't get
We're having technical difficulties here in the room, so it'll be a couple minutes.
okay. You can use RG6. It's just that you end up having to use those Type F cable TV kind of connectors on it, and then you can go through a little bit of an adapter to get PL259s, and I've done that as well,
Okay.
and it works fine. It stands up. It does real well, and because it not only has a braid, but it has an aluminum foil kind of jacket, its loss it's really low.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the whole point of cable TV is to get it to you.
So yeah, and at the frequencies they're operating on, which is not what we're doing on HF, they're really much more troubled with loss.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're having technical difficulties, somebody said?
That's what they said.
Yeah, we're having audio visual difficulties at the moment. So
Okay.
we can hear you on the Zoom, but they can't hear you in the room.
Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes, I can see the screen.
Okay. That's good. That's good.
And so can they, but they can't hear you.
Oh, you can always read the screen, but I always have a few thousand carefully selected words available on all subjects, so I want to be able to talk a little. So which one of you is in Oregon?
That'd be
That'd
Mark.
be me. That'd be me.
Mark. Okay. Where in Oregon are you?
Near Salem.
Okay. Okay. Carol and I have been out to the wineries up there in the Willamette Valley. And I prefer the Oregon and Washington Pinot Noirs
You
to
can
the
hear them
California.
now. Okay. They can hear you now.
Aha. Okay. So none of you guys are in the room, right? You're all scattered.
Oh, a few of us are.
Okay. Wow. I haven't been out to Washington State and out to the Northwest in a long while, but I need to sometime go. I've got a brother living in Port Townsend, Washington. And he gets after me about why I haven't
Just
been out
around
there.
the corner from where we do our field day.
Oh, okay. I should know that and tell John to go running out there come field day. He's not a ham.
Yes, you should.
Yeah. He's been out there for 20 something years and he loves it. I can see why.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Let's ask how we're hearing us outside.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can everybody online hear me?
Is that your regular speaking voice?
I'm trying to.
It's kind of quiet.
Hello, Gil. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
It came up a few dBs.
Well, he needs to set the level for that rather than that whisper you were doing. That's how it's getting.
Okay, I just didn't want to, because you're right in front of the speaker, so I didn't want to like.
What was that?
Oh, coffee away.
I apologize. We have a bunch of comedians in the room. Not being cooperative. Ready? Okay, I'll call the meeting to order, and I'll introduce Ross, W7ROV. Thanks for having that on your hat, so I can remember it. Come on up and introduce the presenter today.
So, can everyone hear me? I had a last minute change to our program today. had a last minute change to our program because the originally scheduled, I never got a confirmation. So I was on YouTube and I was doing a little research on off-center fed antennas, and I came across Ted Edwards, Whiskey 3 Tango Bravo. He had a presentation on YouTube that was I just really liked, and I thought, man, this would be a great topic for our meeting this month. I contacted Ted, and he graciously accepted my invitation. And Ted was first licensed in 1962 with the novice call sign of Kilo November 3 Uniform Whiskey Foxtrot, and he's been licensed for 57 years. And then he finally upgraded in 1977 to an amateur extra, and call sign Whiskey 3 Tango Bravo. He had lived in England for a personal exchange program assignment with the Royal Navy, where he served as the ship's chaplain on the HMS Ark Royal.
Yes.
He's a retired chaplain commander in the United States Navy and a retired priest in the Episcopal Church. So in his immediate ham radio past was he's the past president of the Tennessee Contest Group from 2021 to 2023. So I think this is going to be an exceptionally good presentation, and please give Ted a warm mic and key welcome. And I'll turn it over to you, Ted. Thank you very much.
Okay. Let me first check, make sure you can all hear me. Right? I'm 5x9 out there. This is good. I bring you all the greetings of two of your former members who are my neighbors and who I saw this morning at our local radio club event. You probably know Hoop, who lived out on the San Juan Islands up there at the K9QJS and moved here about 2 years ago. And Hug, who moved here longer ago than that, but I'm not sure when, W6OHM Jeff. They both wanted to be remembered to Wally. And we had our Williamson County ARES meeting this morning, and they were both there and asked to be remembered. So you can all see the screen okay, right? Yes? Somebody say yes. Okay. As you see, I'm Ted Edwards, W3TB and G0PWW, and I'm in Franklin, Tennessee. Franklin is the next county south of Nashville, about 20 miles south of Nashville. And we've been out here about 5 years. We came out here because this is where all the grandchildren are. And, you know, that'll happen to you when you got grandchildren. Those of you who have grandchildren may have done the same thing. Let me also ask, right now I'm moving the little arrow across the screen. Can you all see that?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, good, because I may want to use that to point out things.
Could you put it in presenter mode?
I'm in presenter mode.
No, you're not. Go to slideshow begin.
Let me find what that is, because right now I've got that on my screen.
Slideshow. Yeah, there you go.
Slideshow.
From the beginning.
This slide is the beginning.
No, it's not in presenter mode. Slideshow.
I dropped slideshow.
And over the far left, it says from the beginning.
From the beginning. How's that?
That's right.
And you can still see my arrow. That's good. Okay, let's begin then. You see that ham radio boot camp symbol at the corner. When I first made up, and I've been building it since, but when I first made up a program about this model, it was for presentation in 2022 at the W4DXCC conference, which is primarily contesters and DXers, and it was held in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. It's now moved to the Huntsville, Alabama area for the Ham Fest. That's me. I won't spend much time on that symbol, but I'm primarily a contester and a DXer. It's the way I do ham radio on CW, but also. And but I don't have a tower and a beam. I think I used to be the only president of a significant contesting group that did not have a tower and a beam. Did it all with wires, OCF wires. Here's what's going to come up. 3 parts to come. The first one is my question, what do you really want to work? As a contester, maybe I want to work things differently from you, but it's worthwhile thinking about what you want to work and where those things really are relative to you. Second thing I'm going to do is do some modeling of off-center fed antennas. Some of it using the EasyNet Pro 7.0, some of it using MMANAGAL. Both of those, if you like to do antenna modeling, are available on the internet and they are free downloads. The EasyNet used to be a simple model. The other one was commercial. Some of you may know Llewellyn out there, W7EAZ, who retired a couple of years ago and made the pro version for free, which is great. Third question, what am I using now? And the fourth of the 3 questions will be how did it all work out? So let's go through some of that. First, a little story. Before I retired from the Navy, I got transferred in 1997 to Groton, Connecticut, the submarine capital of the world. Maybe some of you are out there near Bangor, Washington. But I was transferred up to Groton, Connecticut, and I had an off-center fed, and I got a place to live, and I found some convenient trees and strung it up, worked some contests and submitted some scores. And then I got an invitation in the mail from Yankee Clipper Contest Club, which is the big contesting club in New England. And I went to a meeting thinking I was going to be surrounded by the kilowatts and towers and beams people. And the program really was about wire antennas for smaller stations like mine and the considerations of aiming them so that you could make best advantage in contest environment. And what they taught, and something I knew, but I hadn't thought about much, and that is if you can only have one antenna, do what you can to make it favor Europe, because that's where the biggest group of hams is other than here in North America. Find a way to favor Europe. Second, go for South America. Third, go for East Asia. You've all seen the Mercator projection of the map of the world. It was on the classroom wall when you were a kid. We all saw it. We all learned our direction from it. And that map told us here in the East, and it tells you out there in the Northwest as well, that Europe is really east of here. And it told you that Japan is west of here. And those are both lies. It also told you that Greenland is the biggest continent in the world. And of course, it's much, much smaller than that and much smaller than Africa. A lot of problems with this map. But when Gerardus Mercator put this out in 1569, it was the state of the art. And most of us saw it every day for years and years and years. And we may think the world really looks like that. It doesn't. So meet the azimuthal equidistant projection of the world. This is one of them based on Seattle at the center. This is a great map for ham radio use. Take note of the make your own at NS16 net at the bottom. I have at that because you can enter the coordinates or a Maidenhead projection location, something like that, and it will generate this map for you, and then you can use it for things. Azimuthal, it shows you the direction. Equidistant, from the center only, you could measure the distance out to any point on the world. Very handy map. It tells you that Europe is not east of you. Europe is at an azimuth of about 30 degrees, 25 or 30 degrees. Brazil is at about 130 degrees. And East Asia is about 310 degrees. And one of the cool things that happens only for us who live in North America is that South America and East Asia are in opposite directions from each other. I hear it's a little bit bigger so you can see it better. And I put a red line on there, which isn't exactly where I wanted it to be, but it goes through Seattle. And look at that. One side goes to East Asia, the other side goes to South America. It probably would be good to rotate that counterclockwise about 10 degrees. So Japan is literally on the line, and so is Rio de Janeiro. But for a second antenna that doesn't favor Europe, if you're a contester, an antenna that is the same in both directions. We'll give you both of them with another antenna. Much of the rest of the world, you'd need 3 antennas. But I think that is really great. Take a look at this. At 30 degrees, look at the outside, read it right back to the center. 30 degrees is coming through France and the northern end of Britain. 310 degrees is coming through Japan. 130 degrees is coming up through South America. Lots of activity in those 3 places, which for a contester is really important. Those with beams need not care about that. You just turn them. You just got to know which way to turn. So this map is a really important thing to have in mind. Remember 30, 130, and 310. We'll talk about them later. Here's just a section of it. If you think that sending your signal and aiming your antenna to the east is going to take you to the east coast of the United States, it is really true. Look at that. It goes right through Chicago and Norfolk, Virginia. But due east of you is not Maine and New England. I think many people also don't think about the directions relative to where they are. I do. Encourage you to, because when you're putting up an antenna, you might want to know where it favors and where those places are really. Is the East Coast really to the east? No. Only in part. Fortunately, that part is the center. Okay, meet the off-center fed Wyndham antenna. I talk about Wyndham a little bit. Major General Loren Wyndham in 1927 worked with some other hams on the idea of feeding a dipole somewhere other than the middle. Going to get to that in just a moment. And he published an article in QST in 1929, September 1929. There's the page numbers. Kind of like a newspaper article. It goes for a few pages and then picks up the end at page 84. You can find that online, and it's very interesting. What he made was a single wire antenna, okay? A single wire antenna, no insulator in the middle, no balun in the middle, but fed it at a point other than the middle. That was done in his day, and people kind of forgot that for a while. And then in 1980, it worked out that I moved in 1980. And in 1980, this article called The Wider Wyndham by WA4PYQ. He made up the antenna that's in that drawing on the right. It is fed 1/3 of the way from one end, 2/3 of the way from the other. I just called that 33% feed. And since he tried to feed it with a 4-to-1 balun and it did not work out for him, he started working with a bit of a transformer type feed line and played around experimentally and ultimately came up with what you see as a 48-foot piece of 300 ohm twin lead. Remember from TV antennas, the old 320 ohm twin lead we used to use? You don't find it very much anymore. Nobody's doing that anymore. The whole TV world has gone coaxial. But he fed it experimentally until he got it to tame itself down at 48 feet. Then a 4-to-1 balun, which was the voltage kind of balun of W2AU variety, if you remember those. And then 75 ohm coax back to the shack. I made one of those and it worked out great. And I used that for in excess of 30 years. I had to rebuild it a couple of times because wire ages when you put it up in the air, but I used that same thing. I worked most of my DXCC with it, and I was very, very happy with it. There's the footnote, September 1980, 73 magazine, page 68. I have that electronically. If anybody wants to read it, I can send it out. So that's where I put up in Connecticut. It worked out good. I think I got lucky because I just went for convenient trees and started working a lot of Europeans, not giving any thought what my directional situation was. But it worked out quite well, probably more by luck than anything else, in Ledyard, Connecticut, where I had it. Here is Wyndham himself. Picture taken in the middle 50s. He died in 1988, but he was the Adjutant General of the Ohio National Guard. And while most of our inventions are in radio are done by people with engineering kind of backgrounds, he was an attorney, as it works out, in Ohio. There's his QSL card in Reynoldsburg, Ohio. The next slide shows it. Here's some other people he worked with. These three hams that are listed there. But they call the antenna the Wyndham because he wrote the article. And this is just a little side thing about how he sort of developed what he was doing. They didn't have the test equipment that we have now. So on the left, they made up this little kind of a trolley out of a piece of wood with strings pulling down so you could pull it and an ammeter on it. And they drove it up and down the antenna looking at the readings for current on the ammeter until they found a spot they liked. Low tech, but it did a job. And on the right side, you can see a single wire feed at a point where current was good, and the arc, frown-shaped kind of arc above it, talks about relative current at the points of that antenna. Talk about that again in a few moments. The curve coming down is just to show current running on the wire. A single wire feeder onto a single wire antenna, fed 1/3 from the end, an 80-meter antenna, and through a tuner to the shack. That's the Wyndham antenna. The one before with from 1980 is a variation on it. This is technically the Wyndham. All kinds of things that are like this get named after Wyndham, which are for antennas that he never saw in his life. I'm putting this one up just because this one came out of some article in CQ magazine a few years ago, feeding 20% of the end, and then putting up a big capacitor in the middle, 330 puff capacitor in the middle. And that was to simulate as if there wasn't, but as if there were an insulator at that point on higher multiples of bands, essentially taking that whole piece to the left and taking it out of the antenna. This is the antenna I'm going to talk about. This one was in CQ magazine, November 2018, when, as it works out, we were moving here to Tennessee. And that's a picture from the article. I realize it's not as clear as it could be, but look at how the center is supported on a fiberglass pole. You can't see the ends, but they're strung out to trees. This one is something, it's not intended to be, it just had to be for the trees and the support, looking like an inverted V. Doesn't have to be a V. This guy did it because he was building this on a residential lot. And you just don't have a lot of space on a residential lot. And so I'm using this one for the presentation. Because talking about an off-center fade antenna that's 134, 135 feet long is fine until you get people who don't have that kind of space to put it up. That's not very helpful. So I put up this one. This is 68 feet long. And a lot more of you who are watching can probably put up a 68-foot antenna and then can put up a 134-foot of antenna. So this is very helpful. It runs on 40, 20, 15, and 10. This is what I'm using here now. I've been very happy with it. It's 41% from one side, therefore 59% from the other. It averages, you'll see these later, but it averages 200 ohms. So I feed it through 50 ohm coax, RG8X in my case, and a 4-to-1 current balance, which makes it look for 200 ohms. And 200 ohms is in the average middle of the 4 bands worth of impedance. Nothing is perfect when you're using a compromised multiple antenna. You just got to live with that to a certain extent. This one does 15 meters. The 80-meter ones usually don't do that well. Matches 50 ohm coax. This one is up on a support pole. I'm not suggesting putting it on a support pole. I have the support hanging from a tree, but the balun and the coax are relatively heavy, and the life of your antenna will be lengthened by having a support for where it is heavy. If I stumble and say the middle, kick me on that one, because this is not fed in the middle, but it's fed close to the middle, and you can do yourself a real favor by finding a way to support the weight of the coax on the balun. The dimensions are 27 feet on one side and 41 feet on the other, and Dick Sander, K5QY, wrote the article. I also have that article electronically. CQ Magazine doesn't seem to be publishing anymore. And Ross, if anybody wants to get this article from me, if you could maybe pass around a sheet of paper and make up a list of emails. And later today, if I get that list from you, or tomorrow, whenever the list comes in, I will send that out to everybody who wants to see it, because it's a really good article. And I really want to credit it and use it. Moving on. Here are the good things about OCF antennas. One antenna for multiple bands with a single feed point and feed line. Not everybody can get up separate antennas for every band. You can choose the orientation, depending what supports are available where you are, to get the desired directionality. In other words, Europe, South America, and East Asia, in my case. It fits residential lots. Problems. Real dipoles, center-fed dipoles, don't work at even multiples of the fundamental frequency. They just don't. So by going, excuse me, by going off the center, you can find a feed point that'll work on these multiple frequencies. And it will be nearly the same, acceptably the same on all bands, with some compromises. And the opportunities that can be done. I know some of you have bought some of these antennas. I make my own, but there's nothing much to them. And you can get the parts and put up your own, and I do my own. Next slide. What I explained may help you if you see it graphically. Different people learn in different ways. I don't learn well from what I'm taught and told. I'm learned well from what I see. I'm a graphic learner. If you're a graphic learner, you can listen to what I'm saying and you can look at the graphics and make sense out of that. That may help some of you. Those four horizontal lines on there, I'm going to represent for a 40-meter dipole, be 67, 68 feet long. An important concept to review before I begin is that power is equally distributed on the antenna, but power is made up of different components. Remember the P equals IE, the old pi formula? We all learned power is intensity times electromotive force, and that is to say, amps times volts. And you should be able to go on an antenna like this anywhere you want to, if you can get at it when it's way up in the sky, and you can measure your RF voltage, your RF current, multiply them together and always get the same answer. Now, every band is a bit of a compromise, but with the understanding of pi comes the second understanding, which find a point on the antenna where current is relatively high and feed the antenna there. Now, those blue arches that you see on this represent current, the one that are kind of frown-shaped. Imagine a smile-shaped one opposite that, which represents RF voltage. You're feeding it, it's the current that puts your signal out, but RF voltage will be high where current is low. Simple. Opposite that, RF voltage will be low where current is high. You want to feed it where current is high. And if you look at the first one, imagine that as a 40-meter dipole being fed at 40 meters with, get the focus right, an insulator at the end. We all know about these things. Voltage will be high at the end and current will be low in the end. Current is best in the middle. You see that? Right for the moment, forget that little red spot in the arrow pointing at it. That is a 40-meter dipole being fed at 40 meters. If you go to the second one down, that's a 40-meter dipole being fed at 20 meters. Suddenly, the same antenna is a full wavelength long. And at the middle, voltage is high because current is low. They go opposite each other. They move opposite each other. They always multiply out to the same product. Just a little story. In the introduction, I mentioned my novice license, KN3UWF, and when I was a novice, my Elmer, who taught me things, who was the principal of my what we will now call a middle school, or used to call junior high. He was an 80-meter CW traffic handler kind of a ham. And so we all ended up on 80 meters. Fortunately, I had enough space using a friendly neighbor's tree to get up an 80-meter dipole. And I was up on 80 meters and it worked great. But I kept on hearing how wonderful 40 meters was. I wanted to do that. So one afternoon after school, I took my lunch money and I pedaled on down to the local radio store and I bought a crystal for 40 meters. Those of us who were a certain age knew that we had to use crystal control for frequency back in those days. I bought a 40-meter crystal. 7168 was the frequency, and I took it home and plugged it into the radio, and I couldn't get it to load. And I had a terrible time. And I didn't know why. Certainly my antenna must have been long enough. What's the matter here? I couldn't get it to load. They could hardly hear me across 10. I wasn't very happy. So I went back to the books and started learning more about antennas than I learned back at that point as a 14-year-old, and discovered that a full wave antenna, this is to say an 80-meter antenna fed at 40 meters, you're feeding it where voltage is high and doesn't accept power, and it reflects it right back down. So it gives you a really horrendous SWR, and it doesn't work. So I learned a few lessons that day, and that's how I learned this one. The second line is the 40-meter antenna fed at 20 meters, where voltage is high and current is low. Doesn't work. The third antenna coming down there is a 15-meter one. We're now at 3 times the frequency, 21 megahertz, the 15-meter band. And that antenna is now 1.5 wavelengths long. And as you look at it, you can see the current's acceptable at that point. Just note, we'll talk about it later, there's more antenna on one side than the other. Therefore, there's more current flowing on one side than the other. And that'll have something to do with the directional characteristics of the signal you're putting out. But a lot of people have used 40-meter antennas on 15 meters and just done fine with them. Put them up, start working a lot of stations, say, isn't this great? Isn't this fun? And perhaps you have done that with a 40-meter antenna on 15. The last one at the bottom is the same antenna fed at 4 times the frequency, 28 megahertz. Therefore, it is 2 wavelengths long. And everything that went wrong at 14 megahertz, 1 wavelength long, goes wrong again at 2 wavelengths long. But then you go back and look at the red circle and the arrows that point at it in each case. And that's red spot just on modeling indicates where the feed point is. And this feed point, common on all of them, has current flowing in every case. And that means you can put power out there. The impedance will be different on all these bands. But as you see, when we can go a little farther, it will average out around 200 ohms, 4-to-1 balun, 50 ohm coax to the shack. And that works out really quite well. Again, not perfect, but 4 bands on 1 antenna that'll fit in a residential lot is a good thing. Next one, Ross asked me to talk about, so I put this in here. These are the same diagrams fed at other places. There's the one on the left shows feeding at approximately 1/3 of the length of the antenna, 33%. And if you look from the top one down to the third one, you'll see that voltage is high and current's low. Didn't work out at 3 times the frequency. He also asked me about 29%. Ross, I don't know why you came up with the number 29%, but I tried to point that arrow at about where 29% is. You can imagine a line going up from it to see where what feed point would be like at other things. The key to an off-center fed window, the key to it is to find the point somewhere on the antenna where you can get as much current on as many bands as you can manage. Okay? It doesn't matter where you feed it. What matters is you get the impedance right so that you can put power on it. And a 4-to-1 balun on 50 ohm coax at 41%. And it could be 40. It's not fussy, really. But at that point, you sort of optimize the ability on these multiple bands to get the job done. So I put this slide in to try to answer what Ross was asking me about. I like to do antenna modeling. I'm going to be doing a program on antenna modeling, which you could all use at some point if you want to. I'm going to be doing it at our local club next month. And I use two modeling programs, as I told before, the MMANA.GAL, which is not an American program, but it has some really neat features, and the EasyNext 7.0, which is an American program and also has some really neat features. It's just they're both helpful in different ways. Think back to when you were doing algebra and geometry in high school, and maybe you've used this since, but that's probably where you first met it, with the Cartesian coordinates of X, Y, and Z on a graph. You've seen this before, long time ago probably, may not use it very often. They're called Cartesian coordinates because they were created by that French philosopher of the 18th century, René Descartes. You will see, and so I just want to alert you on this when I'm doing MMA and A. When we learned this in American schools, we were learned that the X coordinate goes up and down. Excuse me, the X coordinate goes right and left, and the Y coordinate goes up and down, and the Z coordinate is away from the paper, which would mean antenna height. That's how we learned it in America. When I get to some things that are on the MMANA, you're going to find differently that the X coordinate goes up and down and the Y coordinate goes left and right. Don't let that concern you. It's just when I make these things, I got to pay attention to that or I'll make it backwards. I got this program in a book that I bought from the Radio Society of Great Britain at the Dayton Hamfest, actually. And it came with a disc, and I loaded that disc years ago. It's a British program. Why I spelled program that way. It's also a metric program. You can enter your dimensions in feet, and it will convert it for you. When you're done, you might have to do the math to convert back because it does not do that for you. That's not the end of the world. You just got to pay attention to it. Hold on here. That's my dog. Try to put a few dB down between me and the dog. When I make models, I make them with a wire running north and south for my own convenience. You don't have to, but I do. When you make an off-center fade antenna, remember one section is longer than the other. So I tend to put the longer piece on the further up section, which means if you can look at the XY coordinates and you imagine them as north and south, you can directly take your mind off of that plot that you see to the map and figure out what the aim is. I take so I'm measuring and making my antennas look like they're running north and south with the longer half further north, just so you see it. They will also give you azimuthal drawings of directionality, but they will not give you azimuthal drawings at zero elevation as if it was running on the ground. So you've got to insert on the modeling program an elevation off the earth. And I just use 30 degrees. Most DXing is done between about 15 and say 40 degrees. I arbitrarily ran mine at 30 degrees. I also ran mine at 15 meters of height, which is 49 feet, which is what mine actually is. And models don't account for the sag of a wire stretched out across the earth. You can't pull a wire tight enough to make it flat. We call them flat tops, but you can't actually make a flat top. And the tighter you make it, of course, the more strain there is. And strain on trees and strain on wires and ropes that go over trees is not a good thing. So I just don't account for the wire sagging. So let's do these antennas now. Okay, the wire runs north and south, as I said. This is on MMANA-GAL, 40 meters. The left side is the standing wave ratio. Now, I hope that's clear enough on whatever screens you're looking at. But if you look at that, this is from 7.0 to 7.3 megahertz, standard band for 40 meters. All the SWRs are below 2 to 1, one end to the other, which is pretty good. If you're below 2 to 1, you just don't have to get fussy and worry about SWRs too much. Further to the right, sort of in the middle of the screen, this is where the azimuthal plot is projected. And I'm only going to show it on 40 meters this way. The arrow points to V plus H. Separately, vertical polarization and horizontal polarization plots. The one that looks like a number 8 is the vertical. The one that looks like an infinity symbol or an 8 laid over sideways is the horizontal plot. I'll also then move here to the same sort of thing with the arrow pointing to the total plot. This is those two kind of merge together. And if you look at this, think about the antenna running north and south. See, look at this, the British one. See the X on the top instead of the right or the left, and the Y is on the left? That's that aspect of how the other nations do Cartesian plots that I was talking about. But this one runs perpendicular to the wire when you're measuring it 30 degrees off the horizon. And if you drew a line on the horizontal line on that graph and measured the vertical aspect of it, you would see it on the right. It's pretty high because the antenna is just not that far off the ground. And that's what happens when antennas are low on the horizon. Excuse me. Let's go to the next one. We'll come back to this in a moment. Here's the 20-meter one. Notice how on that graph, the SWR has crept up towards the top of the band. And we'll go to the next one. It's actually crept out of the band. And on 10 meters, well, 10 meters is a huge band, but it's out there beyond where we normally go. Now, let's take these back to 40 again. I'm a CW guy. It does not suit me to have SWRs get bad at the CW portion of the band. I'm such a CW guy that I don't even leave the microphone connected to the radio. If I want to get on phone, I'll connect the microphone, but it's kind of in my way, so I don't leave it there. But I want to have an SWR that's better at the lower end of the band. So what I did when I made the one of these that I've got flying at the house is I lengthened the longer side. Remember the sides were 27 and 41 feet long. I lengthened the longer one, put it up there and measured SWRs, and I ended up trimming about 3 inches off of it later on. But that moved the SWRs down to the CW portion of the band, which then took all of these little graphs, look at that, and moved them somewhat to the left. I think this antenna was intended for phone people instead of CW people. But you might want to, if you build one of these, you might want to consider making I wish I'd made the two sides maybe 6 inches or 9 inches longer, but I didn't, and I haven't changed it. You might want to consider making the antenna a little longer, putting it up, get your SWR meter out and trim it to get those curves to be where you want them to be. Now, take a look at the chart here. The first column on the chart shows a few sample frequencies on 40 meters. The second column shows the impedance under the chart where it says R. This shows the impedance, and those are generally in the low hundreds of ohms. Remember, we're pretending we're feeding this thing at a 200 ohm point. 200 divided by 110, say, is going to be a number less than 1.8, something like that. And that's why you get those SWRs. You can largely get closer to real SWRs by taking impedance and your design impedance, where you're feeding it at 200 ohms, and dividing them one by the other. These are antennas that are all on 20 meters, here on 40 meters, below 2-to-1 SWR. That works out really very, very well. Let's go to 20 meters again. These impedances are at about 260 to 270 ohms. And you can see on the SWR chart on the left that take any of these numbers, divide them by 200, and you'll get something in the order of 1.5, and a little less than 1.5, which is the SWRs that you see on the left. Again, look at the pattern. See, the lobe is bigger on the longer side of the antenna. It's not symmetrical. And if we go to 15 meters, where the shorter side of the antenna really starts to serve at the greatest level, the pattern is still not equal. And these 200 and, let me take a look at it, 200 teens, 220 ohm divided by 200 gives you a very good number, 1.4, 1.3. That works out really quite well. And then we go to 10 meters. Again, the antenna is not symmetrical, and we have in the order of 130 something ohms. 200 divided by 130 will give you an SWR in the order of 1.5 or so. Do you all see how that works? Are there any intermediate questions about that? You can take the impedances, divide them by the feed point, either up or down, doesn't matter, and get a measure of your SWR. And by choosing a point to feed the antenna where there is current flowing, generally, the SWRs will be low and you get a 4-band antenna. It's almost that simple. Of course, there's more to it not technically, but it's almost that simple. Let's go on from there. Now that looks like the bug that splattered on the windshield of my car on the way over to that radio club meeting this morning. But what it is it's a combination of those plots all imposed on there. And I put little graphic of Europe on the upper right and South America on the lower right. But when I first made this and simulating my wire on what looked like the north and south kind of plot, I looked at this and I said, look at all those lobes that are gathered together around Europe. Look at that. I bet you if I could turn this antenna clockwise just a little bit, I could maximize that. And then also maximize South America. And as it happens, maximize East Asia, because my line from here through the middle of Europe is 45 degrees. Yours is 30. My line to South America is more like 150 degrees. Yours is more like 130. And my line to Japan is about 330 degrees instead of 310. So I could write this whole thing and rotate it to the right and maybe make my lobes line up on all my desired directions. Wouldn't that be the greatest thing since sliced bread? Back in those days, I didn't have a way to sort of handle that. So I printed out a pattern of the lobes. I printed out a azimuthal equidistant projection of the world both on sheets of paper. And I took them to the restaurant where we were all meeting for breakfast on Saturday morning. And I took a little Scotch tape and I went to the window where I could get a lot of light through. And I Scotch taped the map to the window and then hand placed these patterns over the map, center on center, and turned them slowly so I could see what was going on. Got enough light shot through both sheets of paper. Really low tech, but it taught me what I wanted to know, that I could get myself a very effective situation if I only paid attention to directionality of antenna and directionality of contest stations. Very simple. It worked out pretty well. On this one, you take a look at this. You can see the 40-meter one represented in the black oval that goes out to both sides. Okay. You can see the bright blue one is the 40-meter. The magenta is 15 meters and the green is 10. Varies band to band. But in each case, you get, except for the primary one on 40, you get kind of what looks like a kind of a butterfly. I guess that's the only way to describe it. A 4-lobed butterfly. And you could take advantage of that to aim your antenna by your choice of your trees and your mount, whatever the considerations are where you live, by trying to lay out these things so that the lobes point to Europe, South America, and East Asia. I did that and it worked out really well. Then I wondered about those lobes to the left, southwest, to the left and right. For me, they're going out across Mexico and into the Pacific Ocean. And probably I wouldn't work much on those, but that's fine. They just got to do that. And suddenly I worked a lot of New Zealanders and Eastern Australians. So that worked out fine. These are the SWRs. Take a look at that chart. It's made with EasyNIC 7 with a long sweep of the band from 6.8 to 28.7 megahertz. But it shows the SWRs at these different bands and look at how well that works out. And below the names of the bands, look at the numbers. 107, 277, 237, and 136 ohms. None of them is at 200, but 200 makes a nice average in the middle. And that worked out really well for me. I love this antenna. This is something we have on our local website here. It's now broken, or I would just tell you to go look at it. It's centered, of course, here on Tennessee, but I've got to talk to N4CCB about getting this fixed. You could move this antenna in 10-degree intervals and turn it around and see where it goes. It was really cool. I don't know what's broken in the website right now, but I hope he gets that fixed. This is where I live. This is my house in Franklin, Tennessee. I tried to make this with Google Earth. One thing that happens with Google Earth is if you draw a line on Google Earth, it goes on the ground instead of over the tree. So it looks like kind of a silly thing, but look at the house on the left. That was when I was trying to aim at 15 degrees to the right of north to get my lobes where I wanted them to be. The reason you can't see the whole antenna is that, well, the tree that was supporting the magnolia tree that was supporting it was on the left, and it seems to go under the tree. It didn't really, but that's how Google Earth made it. Then I had to take that tree down because that tree wasn't healthy. So I did, and then I made up this 68-footer that I've been talking about, and I ran that one in the opposite direction at about 120 degrees azimuth. And again, it seems to be mostly under trees. It's bad depiction of it, but it shows what I was able to do. And I'm having a lot of fun with that. It's working out really well. Well, let me just say something about balance, because this is almost like the last slide here. And Ross was asking me about balance. If you go to any of the places you might buy a ballot from, like DX Engineering or somebody like that, you'll find that they're selling balance at 1-to-1, 4-to-1, 9-to-1, and 7-to-1 impedance ratios. And it works out that balance are essentially like a transformer. They have turns around them, proportional turns. And the impedance transformation ratio of one of these balance is the square of the number of turns. So if you have an equal, you end up with equal number of turns, you get a 1-to-1 balance. 2-to-1 turns, you get a 4-to-1 balance. 3-to-1 turns, you get a 9-to-1 balance. And a lot of balances are being sold at 49-to-1, which is the square of 7. And those are used for feeding those antennas at the end. At the end, I heard before we started one of you talking about that. At the end of the wire, an end-fed wire, and an end-fed wire fed at a high voltage point is about 2,500 ohms. And so 50 ohm cable times 49 is going to be 2,450 ohms, and that's how you work to feed an end-fed wire. And that's why that works. Some people feed them with 9-to-1s. I'm not doing that because I'm doing off-center feds. But that's a quick explanation about balance. If you needed other balance, you could probably design and make one. For 160 meters and 80 meters here, I have a K9AY receiving loop. And I wanted about 6-to-1. So I played around with that, and I found out if I wound my own, and it's not a transmitting antenna, so it's not going to fry itself on power as a receiving antenna. So if I made it with a turns ratio of 5-to-2, which is 2.5-to-1, 2.5 squared is 6.25, and suddenly I had a 6-to-1 balance. That's how I made my receiving balance. But you can play with balance like that. I'm just saying that what's on the market, if you're going to buy one, which you probably are, because it's a receiving antenna who much has to deal with it. But for a powered antenna, we're going to run power through the thing. It might get hot out there in the sky. You might want to do a commercial balun because the ability to make something that can stand up to your heat and your power is an issue. I used to use, I run 500 watts here. If I turn my amplifier on, I've got an Electrat 500-watt amplifier. And I used to find that on 40 meters, after about an hour, the SWR would change, and I didn't know why. And I think I was baking the balun out there in the tree. So I don't recommend making your own balun unless you can really make it heavy and substantial. Just the last thing about balance. The market's going to be 1-to-1, 1-to-1, 4-to-1, 9-to-1, and 7-to-1. I really wish it was a 2-to-1 balun because I would like to have a 100-ohm antenna that I could feed that way. But I really can't do that. How do you handle that? 1-to-1 balun, 75-ohm coax, which is about as close as you can get. 75-ohm coax, RG59, RG11. Enough of that. First of all, I want to thank you for watching. If you have an antenna issue you're trying to solve, maybe this will help you. If somebody at the meeting, or if you want to write to me directly, there's my email address, w3tp.ted@gmail. I will send you the article about the that 40 through 10 meter I'll be happy to send back the file for you. Just email me and I'll send it back. Thank you for being here today, and I'll take some questions. Who's got questions? There's always questions. The only stupid question is the one you don't ask, so go ahead and ask. There are no stupid questions here. I don't hear anything. Okay, well then, back to Ross.
Hey, one comment.
Yes. So?
Hey, this is Devin Hamilton, N7IQZ. I'm out of Redmond, Washington. I just want to say, as a very novice wire guy, running a 203-foot end-fed dipole is my primary DXer. I really appreciate this prezo, and I learned a ton and got lots and lots of notes. Thank you very much for all this great information.
Well, I'm happy to provide it. And if Ross wants to take the presentation I'm doing on modeling itself, which I'm doing for my local club in October, it'll be on YouTube, or I'm happy to come and present it myself. The only thing I have that's concerning about end-fed wires is that they're very hard to model, so your directionality is hard to figure out.
I've also experienced that. Yes, I'm definitely aware of that.
Yeah, Devin, it's let me take a note here. How long did you say the antenna is?
It's a 203-foot end-fed with a 9-to-1 Unan at the low end. The high end is at 65 feet over the top of a maple tree, and there's probably about 10 feet on the other side. So, think of it as a lopsided inverted V.
Yeah, okay.
And then the low end starts at a decorative willow that's probably at the base of that tree, only about 5 feet off the ground. So 5 feet on the low end to 65 feet on the high end.
Okay. I don't know what I'm going to get if I try to model that, but I'll play with it and see what I can get.
All right, thanks.
I think what you're going to find is that it is pretty highly directional, especially at multiples of frequency out towards the end of the antenna as it was goes away from yourself.
Yeah, based on just, the empirical data, I get across the United States quite a bit, especially into the southern states. And then I also do pretty well into Canada and sometimes Alaska. And then, with conditions recently, I've had very interesting surprise contacts into like Italy and Norway and stuff like that. But it's very unpredictable.
Hi.
Yeah, it depends what the bands are doing. What direction does it run?
Yeah, so the base of the antenna is effectively pointed compass north. So it is pretty much north-south. And I do have a counterpoise that's about a third the length of the flying wire.
Okay. I'll play with it a little bit, see what I can get.
Okay.
9-to-1 and 203 feet long is that's really long. That's almost a half wave on 160 meters.
Yeah, yeah,
You probably
and
get a very complicated pattern because it's so long. And you run it up on bands that are multiple wavelengths, you know. 141 feet is the average sort of 40-meter full wave. So the thing's 1.5 wavelengths long on 40 meters.
yeah, yep.
It is.
And it was actually purchased as one of the older design kits from Palomar Engineering. So it came with the wire, the counterpoise, the Unan, and then pretty good set of instructions. My orientation and where I have it configured is based on what I could access via drone to drop a line in the big tree, and where I could orient.
City about a year ago, and my wife K4 KOI, and I'm KW6A, and it was quite a surprise to hear fellow Tennessean. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. What was your call sign?
KW6A, Kilo Whiskey 6 Alpha.
Okay.
We used to be in WCare, remember? And
Yes,
also,
that's our.
we were that was a member of Nashville VE team,
Mm-hmm.
and
We probably know a lot of people in common, don't we?
we really miss Tennessee, mainly because we miss the nice people, and also my antenna. We had 3-element cubical quad, and well, but people actually we're making lots of friends here, including the Mike and Key Club, and they are just as nice as WCare people. But the antenna is we miss. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah, I'll carry your greetings to the WCares Tuesday morning breakfast, because you probably know a lot of those guys. Like tomorrow we'll go.
This is Daniel KL7WM. I appreciated your comment about heating of the toroids on the battles like that. If you're using one toroid, a 43 mix, it's good for about 100 watts, but you're using 500 watts. What you need to go to is 3 toroids at 52 mix, and that will handle up to 800 watts. And what happens with the toroid, when you heat it up, it loses its magnetic properties, and then when it cools off, it comes back. So
I'm sure I was saturating it.
Yeah,
and
you're oversaturating. You need to go to a 3 toroid mix on that situation.
Yeah. Well, you know what I did is I went over to DX Engineering and I bought myself a really heavy 2 kilowatt balun, and I changed it out, and then I made up another antenna using that other balun that I'd been saturating. And actually, the Boy Scout place over here on near me uses it because they run 100 watts. You can run 100 watts all day and night on that.
Yeah, 100 watts you can do all kinds of things with, but when you got going with the linear, you need the larger toroids and for the heat.
Yeah, a substantial toroid.
There are 2 over here.
Yeah, please. Next. A little louder, I can't hear.
No more questions? Any questions on Zoom? All right. Well, I want to thank you very much, Ted. This was a very good presentation, and I think from the comments and questions that the club gave you, much appreciated. And maybe
thank you for the opportunity to make a presentation.
I've
got that other presentation I'm doing, I said, in a month about modeling. You want me to do something with that? Or if you want to carry it, I can just send you the link. Because at WCares, we're now taking all the presentations and putting them up on YouTube, which is how you found this one.
Well, thank you very much. And there's a good possibility I'll contact you again for the modeling. I'll see what the interest of the club is. But I do use EasyNeck, and I've spent many hours staring at the screen, frustrated. Why doesn't this work? So
well, there is that whole aspect of it. And the presentation I'm putting together for a month from now is all on EasyNet.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we have to start the business part of the meeting, and I will contact you again on those articles that you offered us. I think I'll just contact you and have you send me one of each, and then we'll put those on our group drive so anybody in the club can access them, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll send you the 3 different articles I referred to. I don't have a copy of the one from 1929 in QST, but it's available online because I found it just the other day. And I'll send them to you, and you can do what you're going to do with them.
Okay. Thank you, Ted.
You're welcome. If it's okay with you guys and I can be excused, it's lunchtime here.
Have a good
Okay.
day.
Thank you all. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, yeah, we'll start the meeting in at 10 after, so this will give us a donut break. Sorry, Robert. Too bad you're not here.